Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hello and happy Friday. I'm Tracy B. Wilson.
And I'm Holly Fry.
This week we had our Unearthed episodes for the first 3 months of 2022. It is always an adventure going through these. And this adventure, this time, has been informed by another podcast. That podcast is called Sapiens, a podcast for everything human. And this season of the Sapiens podcast is specifically about how Black and Indigenous people are changing the field of archaeology, which is something that I have been trying to be more mindful of while working on these episodes.
Yeah.
As of when we are recording this, I think there are 6 episodes out in the season. I'm not sure how many there will be altogether. Some of the stuff that they've talked about is stuff that I have thought about before and have tried to incorporate into the podcast, like the kind of language that we talk about when we talk about the things that are done at archaeological sites. Like something that has already been on my radar is making sure that when we're talking about something related to an indigenous culture, we're not using different language with loaded connotations that we wouldn't use. Something that makes that would make what we're talking about seem somehow less or inferior. But then there's also layers that I have never thought about at all. Like in the first episode, they talk about language, and one of the things that they talk about is describing the objects that are found in archaeological sites as belongings, because in a lot of the cultures that we are talking about, that's a person's belongings. It's not an artifact. It's not a relic. It is something that belonged to a person. And, that person is an ancestor, not like a set of remains. And so it has given me a ton to think about. I highly recommend it to everyone. I'm sure there will still be times that we are doing stuff in Unearthed and we talk about stuff that looking back on it, I'm like, I might have handled that differently, or I might have described that differently. But it also, before even getting to this podcast, these kinds of ideas have affected the sorts of work that I want to talk about. So like when we were talking about the community-led project to look at specifically genetic ancestry to Indigenous people, like all of that is so complicated for a lot of different Indigenous communities. And the project that we were talking about, like it came from the community. The Indigenous community was leading and guiding a lot of it. And like that's the kind of work that I'm most interested in talking about when it comes to any Indigenous community in North America, but then also communities anywhere that was colonized.
Yeah.
Like there's just a whole layer of, like Europeans colonized this place and now European archaeologists are coming to do work without necessarily consulting with the people there. Like all of that, I would really much rather talk about work that like has that community's involvement and ideally is not just something that's like, hey, we're going to repatriate this stuff afterward. Like not like that, but like getting that community's involvement, being collaborative with that community from the beginning, not as like an afterthought. That's definitely shifted what kinds of projects and what kinds of excavations have been on the show over the last several installments of Unearthed.
Yeah. You also dovetailed on another podcast without realizing it, because as we record this, an episode of Criminalia has just come out where we talked about how many fairly recent pardons and apologies about witch hunts, witch trials, and executions have happened. Because our current season is about witchcraft and alchemy, and it's all so much of it is horrible torture, awfulness. But we just did an episode where we talked about how many of the events that happened have been apologized for in recent times, as well as apologies that have happened throughout the year. So you accidentally Venn diagrammed us, which was great.
Yeah. I did not put that part about Scotland's apology in the updates, because I don't think we've actually ever talked about any of the witch trials in Scotland specifically. We
I
have
don't
lots
think
of
so.
episodes. Yeah, we have episodes about witch trials and witch hunts and witch hunters and things like that in other parts of the world, but I think not Scotland specifically. If we do, I missed it when I went looking to double check. Have we ever talked about this specific thing?
I don't think so. Another thing that you put in this edition of Unearthed made me laugh so hard in my soul.
Oh, what was it?
And I bet you would never predict what it was. It was the bit about the discovery of geese being domesticated in China much earlier than we thought. Because my first thought was, you can't domesticate a goose. And I say that because when I was a kid, we had a farm. We had geese. They're very smart and wonderful. But my mother, who was a character, fancied herself to be like some sort of animal whisperer.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this one goose named Judy, who was, to put it kindly, mean as hell. Like, she was just like, I was a little kid at this point, and Judy would see me and be like, I'm coming for you. And so, like, I thought she was terrifying, but my mom was convinced that she and Judy were BFFs, and she would, like, show Judy to people and be like, oh, this goose hates everyone, but it loves me. And there was one day where she had picked it up and was holding it under her arm, and initially the goose, who was a very pretty little thing. She had this great little weird gray streak on her side. Like, she was otherwise like a that off-white white goose color, had this gray streak. So she's kind of distinctive. And my mom was petting her and talking about how docile and sweet she was with her. And then at one point, Judy had just had it and turned and essentially mauled my mother.
Oh, no.
And my mom had like this giant mark on her neck for like a month because it took a really long time to heal.
Oh,
but it just made me chuckle because the phrase domesticated goose isn't real in my world.
Yeah.
That's not to say someone's going to write us and say, I had a goose and it was very sweet. I'm sure they exist, but having had many geese growing up, they could be lovely at times, but you could not trust them.
Yeah, they have a reputation for being ornery.
Yes.
Like, I was on a walk the other day through the town where I live, and I saw a child who looked 5 or 6 years old just chasing some Canada geese around. And their parent was there doing nothing about this. And I was like, this is headed for disaster. I was expecting at any moment for one of these geese to be done. And it did not happen while I was there. But I was like, never in a million years would adult me get anywhere near into the faces of these geese as this child was doing.
No.
My own experience is that geese have more of a reputation for being sometimes hostile to the human beings around them, but chickens have more of a reputation for being hostile to each other.
Yes, 100%. We also had chickens, and like that was, again, I have certainly seen videos online of very cute chickens being very sweet, but like our chickens were not kind to one another. They had plenty of everything, and they lived in a big like outdoor space. We didn't have like a tiny, it wasn't like they were competing for resources and it led them to that behavior. They were just territorial and mean in my experience.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even talk about our roosters, which like traumatized me as a kid. We had 2 of the meanest roosters I have ever encountered.
The most traumatic incident with an animal in terms of that animal's treatment of me that I ever had as a kid. We had some family friends that lived about as far in the country as we did. And I was walking down a path by their house, and they had this mean old tomcat out of nowhere just clawed the back of my leg from like thigh to below my knee. And at that point, I knew I wanted a cat more than anything in the entire world, but I don't think I had managed to like will that into existence yet. But even that was not enough to
deter you.
deter me from the quest to get a cat.
No.
Which then I did.
Listen, I still love geese, but I know to
Mhm.
keep my distance. I ran into a group of them when I was out walking a while back. There's a park that I was near, and I presumed they had come up from the pond in that park. And I was just like, hey guys, I'm going to be super cool with you. I'm going to walk this way. And if you keep honking, but I'm going over here, it's totally fine. Like, I think they're adorable and funny, but like you, I would not get up in their faces for all of the money on earth.
Yeah. I was walking to a friend's house one time a while back, and my Google Maps directions had me sort of following this little path into a little wood and then crossing a bridge over a river. And I already was like, this looks like a place somebody would go to get murdered by that river.
By the geese.
But there was also just a field of geese between me and there. And I was like, I got to get my way through all these geese. There's no other way to get over this river besides this bridge.
You're going to change the song to Over the River and Through the Geese. And it will be like a survival song and less of a cute
survival
holiday
horror song.
Yeah. Again, geese, very cute. And they're so smart.
Yeah.
But they unpredictable in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Judy. Literally, you could say to any of my siblings or me the word Judy, and we will start cackling, laughing at my mother, thinking she had a special relationship with this goose that just embarrassed and mauled her all at once.
Oh, no.
She was fine. She wasn't like, when I say she mauled her, she wasn't disfigured or anything, but her neck she had a big old goose egg on her neck for a long time. It got to the point where she had, in her final lunge, bit my mom and then would not let go.
Oh, no.
And like, geese teeth are sharp. So that was Judy.
Yep.
Cannot be domesticated.
That you're right. I never would have guessed that was the one that made you laugh in your soul.
Deep in my soul, the darkness where I laugh at my mother and her goose handling ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do recommend, I have not listened to the other seasons of the Sapiens podcast, but I do recommend season 4. Like I said, I've learned a lot from it, and it's given me a lot to think about in the 6 episodes of it that I have listened to so far. And hope everybody has a good weekend lined up, whatever's on your plate. We will be back with a Saturday Classic tomorrow. We'll be back Monday with a brand new episode. Hope everybody's doing well. Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.